started. First and foremost, I recognize the only thing standing between you and lunch is this presentation I give and how quickly I get it done. Good news for you is I've ingested about 500 milligrams of caffeine today, and I talk really, really fast, so chances are we will finish sooner than later. A quick show of hands, how many of you attended Jason Hill's Anatomy of a Red Team assessment yesterday? So pretty much everybody. Okay, good. Entertaining, educational, and dare I say inspiring. Good stuff. So a little background story on that. Jason's the branch chief of NCATS. I'm his deputy. We work together. We talk pretty much every day. But somehow we both managed to submit an abstract for RVAsec and get approved for this conference without the other person knowing. So a lot of what you hear me say today, what Jason said yesterday, and a lot of the slides you see that I'll go through, you will also have seen yesterday. But that's mainly because when I gave Jason the slide deck for peer review, he pretty much stole all my ideas. One other thing I want to bring up. I was looking out at the audience just a little bit ago, just thinking about how great it's been these last couple of days to interact with so many nice, pleasant people at this conference. I say this because the last conference I attended in Las Vegas where I wore my DHS shirt, within about 10 minutes of arriving at said conference, which will remain nameless, I hear somebody yell, "Take this, you miserable, stinking effing Fed." Well, he didn't say effing, and as I turned to acknowledge this warm and friendly greeting by this individual, and boom, boom, get pummeled by the 2 bananas that he threw at me. Clearly, this person just did not like the fact that I'm just a measly civil servant representing the federal government. My point is this: it's nice to be at a conference where I'm not being assaulted by fruit. It's like, and have we, and one other thing, is this conference not kick ass? A quick round of applause for the organizers. You know what? It's not so small where it's awkward. Have you been to those where it's like 10, 12 people just standing around like this? But it's not so big where you're getting lost in the shuffle. So good stuff. All right, today I am going to talk with you a little bit about hackers. All right, I'm not talking about the stereotypical hacker that you envision sitting in a dark room wearing a hood or a weird mask or maybe some of those stock photos. Have you seen the one with the person wearing the ski mask pointing the gun at the laptop? Okay, not that. We don't do that, okay? We find that ineffective. If we ever hit a wall, brandishing a knife tends to do the trick, all right? So we're not talking about that. If you haven't heard of NCATS before and you do a quick search on us, you're going to get a whole bunch of searches, a whole bunch of results. Ignore the first one you see, because that's it's an article written by a very well-known cybersecurity journalist / blogger. I'm sure you've all heard of him. I'm sure he's a lovely individual. Nothing against him or the article. It's just old, outdated, and archaic, filled with inconsistencies and some inaccuracies. Or read it if you want. Doesn't matter. Anyway, taking it a step further, I'm going to share with you how we at DHS emulate the adversary against government agencies, federal, local, state, territorial, tribunal, including private sector and critical infrastructure organizations across the country. We run the gamut. Our customers range everybody from cabinet-level departments, CFO Act agencies, chemical sector, finance, agriculture, water, industrial control systems. Very, very soon, we are going to be putting a significant emphasis on elections because there's a thing happening next November that's kind of important. So we're going to do what we can to work with as many Secretary of the State offices in the country so we can ensure that the integrity of our election infrastructure is safe, sound, and secure, doing our little part to ensure that democracy is safe. Again, kind of important. I ran into a couple minor challenges when putting this presentation together. The first was resisting the urge to do too deep of a technical dive. The organizers of this conference were kind enough to put this presentation in the business track, which is perfect for me because I'm very non-technical. Jason did the technical stuff yesterday, so it's perfect that we're kind of doing the non-technical piece. If you're like me and you kind of lay in bed at night thinking about adversary emulation, like, man, how did Cozy Bear execute that payload on the network? You think about the operators behind the keyboard, right? It's the magic that they work. It's the TTPs that they employ to be successful. That's adversary emulation. But you can't have a successful team if you don't have a lot of magic happening behind the scenes. Those standard, consistent, repeatable, and quantifiable methodologies, those processes, policies, and procedures. So I'm going to step back and share with you how we do what we do, kind of behind the scenes. We'll talk a little technical, a little tactical, a little procedural, but I do want to share with you what allows us to be successful. At NCATS, we strive to be a one-stop shop for all things vulnerability scanning and penetration testing. We have a vast array of services. At the end of the day, we conduct cybersecurity assessments that proactively identify risk and collect the data necessary that allows DHS to make informed, data-driven decisions that will make a positive impact on our nation's cybersecurity infrastructure. One point I want to make, we've just recently realigned. We're now called the Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Agency. So we're at the same level as like a TSA, a FEMA, Coast Guard, CBP, which is allowing us to make, I think, a bit more of a broad and comprehensive impact to the landscape across the government. And this is one of the stipulations of us speaking here. We do kind of have to share what our services are. So we are not intelligence, we're not military, we're not law enforcement, and we aren't regulatory, which means we cannot and do not tell anybody what to do. If there's an issue somewhere, and like, hey, fix this group policy. You know, you gotta patch that system, and something breaks, they're going to go down. DHS told us to do that. So we don't tell anybody what to do or how to do it. We form collaborative partnerships with the community, with our stakeholders, with the system owners, with the innovators, with the scientists, decision makers, and policy makers, so we can help them identify their risk, hopefully mitigate that risk in the future. We're very much on your side. We want to help, and we genuinely want to help, and we want to do what we can, again, to minimize the attack surface across the community. And think about your organizations and the types of risk that exist. And the list is long and painful, right? You got power outages you can't control, and human error, maybe data breaches. You can't control that. There's one variable that you can control, right? And that's vulnerability. If you can manage and understand your vulnerability, you can end up turning risk into advantage, because it is not about risk elimination, it's about risk mitigation and risk management. And you're going to hear the term risk many, many times throughout this presentation, because that's one of our primary focuses, is minimizing risk. Because we can't change the world. We can strive to make change, but we're not going to change everything in one fell swoop. But that is one of our goals. Been around for the better part of the last 10 years, and you probably saw this slide yesterday. A number of our services, all of which are free to the community. If you're interested, if you're a member of a government agency, private sector critical infrastructure, raise your hand and we will gladly hook you up. Cyber Hygiene is one of our more popular services. We have the better part of 1,200 customers in fiscal year 18 alone. We helped mitigate 250,000 externally facing vulnerabilities. That's a huge slice of the attack surface that's no longer there. Okay, our risk and vulnerability assessment, that's a 2-week gig. First week's offsite at our lab in Arlington. Second week is onsite at a customer location. This is applicable to emulation, because it's how we do what we do. That emulation piece, that for the risk and vulnerability assessment, we do our best over the course of a week to emulate a real-world adversary. When we go on-site, we're emulating kind of that rogue user insider threat. Okay, remote pen test, that's a 1-week's engagement. External scanning, port scanning, vault scanning, web app scanning, and then we test a multitude of payloads with the customer to ensure, to see which ones execute, which ones don't. Validated architecture design review, that's a Vader, as Jason mentioned yesterday. We're Star Wars fans here. That's tabletop, Q&A. We look at the config files, look at the security design, and see how they match up to industry best standards. Okay, with phishing campaign assessments, we do critical product eval. It's kind of the out-of-the-box security to understand kind of where those issues reside before they're released to the public. Working with voting machines right now and some aviation. And we also have a red team. That's a true 90-day engagement. So keep that as an option, something to think about for the future. Our goals are of many. Reduce, respond, inform, detect, respond, react, conquer, destroy. At the end of the day, we want to minimize the attack surface, identify as many vulnerabilities as we can, and keep our customers off the front page of a major newspaper because of a data breach that could have been prevented with some basic cyber hygiene and simple tweaks to their security configurations. We all know that's an issue. If you can just do some of the 101 stuff, I'm pretty sure you're going to be in good shape. Some of our success stories. We do the Super Bowl every year. Okay, we are working closely with elections. We're featured on NBC Nightly News a few months ago. That's our lab, kind of nondescript. It's not this impressive, massive room that you'd think it would be. These guys just need a folding table and a laptop, and they're good to go. And then we work with the local and state organizations to let them understand where the issues reside. This may seem harmless and minor. You've probably seen the signs before, zombies ahead, free tacos next exit. Not a big deal, but it's that public trust. If you lose that public trust and there's actually an issue, they may ignore it. So those are the kind of issues that we help identify. Threat emulation comparison, I'm really sorry. This has been beaten to death this week. Jason talked about it. We had another session yesterday about vulnerability and penetration testing, but it's important, I think, for our purposes today that we define a clear delineation of the terms. We live, breathe, and eat this stuff every single day, right? To us, it's obvious. It's second nature. Kind of take it for granted. But how many people with whom you've spoken over the years that just don't get it? We'll do vulnerability scans, and like, okay, you got the scan, so when do you come on site to test our web apps and our database? Like, that's not part of it. So these terms are, I think, especially pen testing and red teaming, they're conflated, okay, used interchangeably or amalgamated. Don't even know what that word means. It was just fun to write. I've talked to people before. I talked to somebody a few months ago. He had this really cool title. It was Advanced Ops Red Cell Extreme. Like, man, you guys must do some really cool stuff. You know, tell me about what you do. So I just use Nmap, do port scans. And that's cool. If you want to call yourself that, I'm not going to judge you very much. Someone's going to call you out at some point. So for him, that works, but for our purposes, we're going to just kind of go through it real quick. Speaking of Nmap, do you all know the story between the developer of Nmap and the movie The Matrix? Anyone see The Matrix? Remember in The Matrix? Trinity, one of the main characters, fires up Nmap, and I think she tries to launch an SSH shell somewhere. Remember that? I'm seeing a lot of nothing. That happens. Yeah, so kind of cool. So the developer of Nmap was super psyched about this because the world's most popular movie is using his tool. So he does what anyone else would do. He grabbed a screenshot, put it on his website. Pretty good. Next day he goes out, sees a high priority overnight letter sitting on his doorstep from Warner Brothers Studios lawyers telling him to cease and desist because they used the screenshot without permission. So Fyodor goes, okay, expletivers, you want to dance? Let's dance. So he sent his own little letter overnight, high priority to them, saying, you used my tool without my permission. So let's start with giving me 10% of the royalties and take down every movie you've ever released. He got a letter the next day, overnight, high priority from Warner Brothers Studios lawyers saying, you can keep the screenshot. So win-win for the good guy. That's off target. I'm sorry, I'm way off topic. That's going to happen a couple times today. All right, a couple caveats. What we do is not proprietary. It's nothing you haven't seen before. It works for us. Okay, I'm not a pen tester or a red teamer. I just work with many awesome, good people who do this, and I want to share what we do, how we do it. We're very transparent. So if you're looking to build some sort of threat emulation capability, hopefully you can walk away with some solid takeaways. If you have a team already, maybe you're looking to enhance it. Maybe there'll be a couple nuggets that you hadn't yet considered. So moving on. Oh, we lost I lost the thing. Oh, here we go. Okay, vulnerability assessment. Pretty straightforward. I don't think there's much confusion on what this is. Automated tool against a defined scope. Set and forget. For the most part, it's automated, sometimes manual. Where are your issues? Where are your vulnerabilities? I don't think it gets more simple than this. Does anyone not know this? Maybe not. I don't know. Again, I've talked to a lot of people who just don't get it. Okay? Figure out where the issues reside, provide some guidance on how to mitigate them, and then move on. As far as our cyber hygiene services go, this is just a quick screenshot of our dashboard. This is what we see. This is a bit archaic and old. Look at 730 behind us. It shows the number of vulnerabilities that we have based on severity, number of reports delivered. And if you are a customer of this, you get a nice, tidy report sent to you every week, digestible from everybody, technical staff, all the way up to the C-level. This is the future. Some really nifty, clever data visualization we're doing here. I think it's pretty sweet. And the idea here is we're gonna put this out somewhat publicly. So if you're a sector-specific agency, say you're water or, I don't know, chemical, and you want to see where the issues reside in your particular sector, you can log in. It'll be all anonymized and sanitized, but you'll be able to see where the issues are. So you can figure out kind of, where to make your risk-informed decisions. Think of something else. I don't know. I met somebody from the maritime industry yesterday. How often do you think of the maritime industry and the shipping ports? I didn't think at all until that. Remember that Wired magazine article last year about Maersk? If you hadn't read that, man, that's he's like a movie. That's some scary stuff. I don't think we take it for granted on how much we kind of rely on the shipping ports of our country and across the world. So maybe the maritime industry wants to see where the issues are so that they can mitigate it in advance. Pen test, this is vulnerability-centric. It's going to help customers identify the vulnerabilities that a scan did not pick up. It's usually short, it's very loud, very noisy, kind of like a bull in a china shop, knocking things over, setting off alarms. The SOC knows we're there. The defenders know we're there. We know, they know. And it actually provides a little bit of entertainment value. Any pen testers in here, by chance? Yeah, a couple. I always find it funny when you get that knock on the door. Hey guys, you're busted. Totally see what you're doing. Okay, so go ahead and stop. Like, we want you to see what we're doing. So that goes without saying. That's by design. The goal here should not be, but sometimes is, but should not be primarily to get domain admin, enterprise admin. If that's a byproduct of what you're doing, awesome. But that should be the only goal. You're going to find as many weaknesses, deficiencies, and vulnerabilities as you can so that your customer can hopefully eliminate attack path before it's exploited by a malicious actor. So again, vulnerability-centric. Red teams, low and slow. These guys are like the ninjas. Our red team is a 90-day assessment broken into 2 phases. They have 60 days to entrench and assess, where they establish the foothold and do their kind of their recon, maybe their enumeration. And the last 30 days, they do something called measurable events, where they maybe add a file to a system, add a user to a group, change the desktop background, all the way up to a ransomware splash screen that the customers, or that some of the users will get, just to see how they respond. Testing the people, processes, and procedure, and technologies of an organization. How well is your SOC working? How well is your incident response plan working? By and large, this is black box. Maybe 1 or 2 people know about it. So the team will do their recon much differently than a vulnerability, a penetration team will. And that's one of the other challenges I faced. How a penetration tester emulates the adversary is very different than how a red teamer does, and very different than how a vulnerability scan does. Is vulnerability scanning threat emulation? I think the knee-jerk reaction would be no. But then you get the argument, well, doesn't the adversary scan for vulnerabilities? If you're looking at your IDS alerts, if you have it tuned the right way, you're going to see a whole bunch of people scanning for a whole bunch of vulnerabilities. So I see the argument. So how each team, each component does their particular emulation piece is going to be different. So I'll try to touch on as many of those as I can. So a lot of solid information that can be gleaned from this type of test. One thing to note, this is a pretty intense exercise for the red team because it is so long and it is so low and slow. So should you be doing a red team against an organization that's never had a pen test or a vulnerability scan? No, because it's going to be a huge, massive mess. That's one thing we try to emphasize. Like if a customer requests it, hey, first you got to do this, then you got to do this other thing. Maybe the pen test for a couple times, get your maturity up to speed, then we can move on to a red team if they're eligible. So why emulate? We're going to spend about 5 minutes on every single one of these topics behind me. No, we're not. I'm kidding. Pick your reason. The first question we always ask is why? Why do you want a pen test? Why do you want a red team? What do you want to get out of it? So we can kind of tailor our operations to meet that need. And for us, it's obvious. Again, it's obvious. We know what the value is going to be. But we often get arguments from the customer, look, we don't need this type of thing, right? We already do our cursory vulnerability scans. We have quarterly phishing. We have our annual IT security refresher. How valuable is that, right? And maybe they have a strong compliance and policy program, all of which are fine and good. But at best, those offer, I think, a theoretical articulation of the vulnerability, whereas, say, a pen test or a red team is going to demonstrate, I think, more value in terms of perceived and real threats, which is more demonstrable and compelling to the IT staff, to the C-level. So come up with your reason. Understand what it is. Be consistent and have that kind of consistent, repeatable message to your people who might not get it. So emulation 101, pretty straightforward. I think it's very obvious to us what it is. You are allowing an ethical, authorized attacker, a person who knows what they're doing on your network, to identify as many deficiencies, weaknesses as you can. So what are the lessons learned? What assets got breached? What users got affected? Walk away with a clear, concise, defined report of what that was. A couple pieces I want to emphasize here. The logging, the communication, and the collaboration. Log everything you do. We log everything. We just had a request from, I think, 2016 that somebody asked. a situation on a network where there was some confusion about a thing. We went back to our logs, pointed it out, gave the answer. If you don't have those logs, if you don't have that information already stored up so you can kind of resort to it later, it might get you in some trouble. The collaboration is key. Teach, learn, and repeat. So that process, the emulation process is adversary emulation, test and measure defense, and then report, review, and follow up. So moving on to kind of how we collaborate, we use Cobalt Strike as our emulation and collaboration tool. That's not the only way you should collaborate. We always have a repeatable infrastructure setup. Our C2 domains, we have a vSphere setup where there's all our Kali VMs, a team server, a team share. Set that team share up so you can add your findings, your data repository, all your raw data, pretty important, because sometimes the customer will ask for that. And some of this for us, is very repeatable. We have run books for every single one of the processes that we have here, for setting up the team share, trying to have a run book for payload creation, because not every payload works on every customer's network. So you have to have a solid repository of payloads and options to use. And of course, your domain set up and your C2s. 201, this is a little tricky. So how much research do you do for your customers before you begin some sort of threat emulation? And do you tailor your threats to meet the threats that are applicable to that team or to that agency? Because the threats that are going against the finance sector are much different than the ones going against, say, I don't know, the chemical sector. So can you tailor those threats by reading those threat intel reports, understanding what those TTPs are, what type of malware they used? That can help. If you want to take it that far, you can. It's a little tricky, because how realistic is it for you to read some sort of comprehensive malware report or threat intel report and replicate that very thing in your domain or on your team? You can try, at least have an understanding of what those threats are so they can be tailored accordingly. We have a lot of different kind of 3-word catchphrases. Kind of evolve and adapt. Don't just accept the status quo. Always change. Always be willing to kind of enhance what you're doing. That's one thing that's allowed us to be successful over the years. And keep that in mind, that status quo piece there. I want to come back to it. And one other thing that we do that is of tremendous value is we map all of our findings to, am I going to get that? Oh, here it is. I don't know what happened there. Okay, we map everything to different frameworks. NIST 853. So the findings map specifically there so the customer knows how that works. MITRE ATT&CK, I think there might be a talk on that this week. We just started doing that. People can look and go, holy smokes, a hacker can do that? So that's something else you can consider. And then also the cybersecurity framework. So keep that in consideration. We have our report templates and all this that we're more than happy to share. Just reach out, and we can collaborate a little bit more moving forward. One thing that, I'm going to go back on here. I preach to the teams as far as not accepting the status quo. Making your TTPs adaptable instead of having that kind of that cookie cutter SOP, what you do with each engagement. And what I've always kind of preached is use the 10th man rule. Anybody see World War Z with Brad Pitt? Probably. Remember the 10th man rule in that? I don't know if you don't. In the movie, one of the Mossad agents is explaining to Brad Pitt why Israel was so prepared for the zombie apocalypse. The answer was simple. It's the 10th man rule. The Israel Security Council had 10 people on it, and the first 9 rejected the idea that there was going to be an issue with the zombies. We don't need to have a problem. The 10th man rule states explicitly that that 10th man has to overrule the other 9, thereby preparing for a black swan event. Black swan event, something you're not prepared for. So that 10th man overruled him. That way they built the wall, kept the zombies out for a while. That's an extreme example. My point is, challenge each other. Challenge your team, challenge your tech leads, challenge your vendors, challenge your customers. Don't just accept what it is. And the reason I bring this up is, look, this is just an example of the CVEs. I don't know when this is from, maybe last year, all based on severity. They do a great job. MITRE does a great job. Our team does a great job working with them. We have a huge group of people that work very closely with the CVEs and with the vulnerabilities. But can we fully trust this? Absolutely. But how many vulnerabilities are we not seeing that have not yet been assigned to CVE? I don't know. I have nothing definitive to support that. But I'd be willing to bet that if there's a vendor out there or a component that has X number of issues, X number of vulnerabilities, there's probably a bunch that we haven't yet identified. What do they say? For every 1,000 lines of code, there's 30 bugs. Now, not every one of those bugs is a security issue. I think maybe 2 or 3 are security, and not every one of those are exploitable. But do the math. How many lines of code in Windows 10? 50 million or something? There's a lot of potential bugs and vulnerabilities that we haven't yet identified. So do your research, work with your vendors, and take it a step further, and don't just accept something as gospel. Or resist the urge to stop. Once you've obtained your goal, maybe you've accessed that critical asset, it's going to be easy. If you think, okay, we're done, let's stop. Resist that urge, keep going, see how much farther you can take it. It's only going to help. On 301, we kind of talked about a little bit of this. Maybe automation, is that the future? I think so. I think there's an option for a lot of this to be automated. I don't know that it will be fully automated. There's a lot of people that believe that robotics are going to kind of take this over. And there are some threat emulation tools out there that I'll share with you later on. And a big thing, transparency. If one of our customers wants to sit in our lab or alongside of us, sit down, learn, we want to help. We want the community to be safer and more secure. We talked about the kind of modeling your engagements to a specific customer. If you can do that, you're going to take the next step. As far as our methodology goes, we saw this yesterday, cyclical process. There's a bunch of these out there. Go online, Google hacker methodology. You'll see probably 20, 30 of them. All of them different, but all of them very identical. Ours is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Recon, exploitation, escalation, persistence, post-exploitation. Now, I mentioned this before, how a red teamer conducts recon, how a pen tester conducts recon are two totally different things. So I kind of colored them in there differently. We're not using OSINT anymore. It's OSINF, because we've been told and advised not to use the word intelligence. I told you before that we're not an intelligence agency. We're not gathering intelligence. We're just gathering information. So that open source information gathering piece is either passive or recon. So a pen tester is going to do it very, very actively. They're going to scan. They're going to let the SOC know that they're there. They're doing their port scans and their vuln scans. The red team is not. They're not going to do any kind of loud enumeration. Everything's going to be passive and offline. This is the fun part. So our pen test team, it's just a matter of finding email addresses. We use a tool called Simply Mail. It's free, it's fun, quick, and easy. There's a bunch of them out there. Recon NG is another good one. Maltego, a lot of stuff there. There's more threat modeling, but I think you can leverage it if you so chose. So a lot of options there. As far as passive goes, going through and seeing what kind of profiles are out there on LinkedIn. I saw a LinkedIn profile from a target once identifying, hey, exactly what it is. I work for Company X, and I oversee a 3,000 host network of Windows 7 hosts. Done. Now I don't have to. Now I've already fingerprinted for me. Something else I think I brought up on another slide. When you do your phishing, what's a wealth of information or out-of-office replies? Hey, I'm out of office for the next 2 weeks at a conference. Please contact Bill and Mary. Perfect. Let's find Bill and Mary and get them. Now, we are restricted a little bit legally. If you're not doing your adversary emulation without some sort of comprehensive rules of engagement, you probably want to consider doing that. So we are limited. Can't create personas. Any red teamers here, can you create personas? Is that something you can do? I don't see anybody. We'd love to, but persona creation, that's serious adversary emulation, if you can do that, but we can't. And that persona creation, sometimes they'll spend years creating a persona, and they'll spend another couple years creating a persona behind the persona. So that can go pretty far. We can't do that. We can't use customer names, or we can't say, hey, we're DOJ and put the DOJ emblem, or put it in our C2 domain. So we are limited with what we can do legally. Impersonation is the thing. So initial targets developed off of the recon that you gather in this phase. Exploitation. What's the number one attack vector? It's going to be phishing. I think they said 97% of the hacks are responsible due to phishing. The other 3% externally facing. It's still a problem. I'm going to give you some examples of what our phishing messages look like. And I don't think you'll be impressed because it's pen test, because the sophistication, we don't have to try that hard. Maybe you'll find it impressive. So that typically if you're on the red team, the non-technical personnel are desired because they're not going to really dig in to the headers to see if it's suspicious. So they'll focus on that. Pen test, it's everybody. We just vomit out a whole bunch of phishing messages and see who clicks. Quick stat. So we track everything. From the time that we hit send on a phishing message to the time it's executed, on average is about 25, 30 minutes. Sometimes it's instant, sometimes it's about 30 minutes. So we'll say 30 minutes. By weight of comparison, the amount of time that it takes for somebody at the agency to notify their SOC before they block it is the better part of 2 hours. By then, they've already established a foothold and have probably escalated. So it's still a problem that needs to be addressed. And that's exactly what we can show them. Look, you guys took 3 hours to do this. You need to tweak your we would advise you to tweak your IR program. Question?
So given all your restrictions on personas and how creative you can be, what are your success stories?
What are success stories?
What's your success rate?
Oh.
100%?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's pushing 100. It's up there. I mean, every now and then we'll come across a customer. If it's a small group, if 5, 10, working on the same floor with each other, that's not going to work. But we don't usually. Those aren't the kind of customers we go after. If it's more than 200, 300, or more than 100, we usually have success. Was there another question? Yeah. Government agencies. Anybody.gov. Federal, local, state, territorial, tribal. Pretty much, yeah. Open source stuff. It's all out there. Yep. We're tool agnostic. We can't and do not endorse one single tool, but we have our favorites. Probably figure out what those are. We're not dropping a 0 day. For the most part, yeah. Doesn't take a lot. One of our most successful campaigns, anybody remember the Ashley Madison breach from a while back? Who was on that? I was on it. Got divorced. I'm kidding. That's one mistake I didn't make. I think we used that as a lure once. I don't remember the numbers. I'm just going to use some arbitrary number. Like 800 people we targeted, 799 clicked. Might not have been that high, but I'd click that. I'll risk a payload executing. I want to see who in my office was on that. Anyway, so that's the kind of research we'll do, right? If we're going against a local agency, a state organization, we'll see if there's any kind of controversy that's happening in the news against that particular entity. But sometimes I think I've got some examples here. Yeah, this is a very low sophisticated example of an older phishing message that worked. Would you click on this? Yeah, well, this is what we do for a living, so probably not. But I bet some of your users would. I bet you 10 years ago you would have. I would have. I want to see who got fired. But that, sophistication-wise, for us, that's pretty obvious, right? Another one. Cell phone usage. This kind of strikes a chord, because everybody has a cell phone. We have a new policy, so I want to see what that is. Again, sophistication-wise, but people still fall for it. Another one, this one is, I'd say, kind of ramping up the sophistication. We see you doing some unauthorized activity on your workstation. That's going to freak people out. They feel like they've done something that they shouldn't have, and maybe they have. So they're going to see what needs to take place. And Jason talked about this yesterday. This is pen test stuff. The red team does this much, much differently. They're going to establish a relationship back and forth with usually one, maybe two people. So they're taking their time. Okay, the persistence piece. Wait, did I miss? Oh, exploitation. Another thing I want to bring up. It's rare that we actually have to throw an exploit at something, because usually it's user error or misconfigurations. The pen test team might, because they have limited time. So they may use Metasploit against Eternal Blue. And that's kind of unfair for some of our customers. Some of them have massively, appallingly vast networks, 100,000 large. And they can be 99.5% compliant with their patching and still have 500 systems hanging out there with Eternal Blue, just waiting to be popped. So it's unfair, but it is what it is. Okay, the persistence piece. Most of the pen test payloads run in memory, which is perfect because it's not going to get detected on any kind of endpoint disk security. Downside of that, of course, host is rebooted. That payload's going to go away. So sometimes we have to install persistence. It's rare that we have to, but that persistence does enable us to remain throughout the reboot. Just have to be careful. I threw at the bottom there just to show you. That's Cobalt Strike. That's just an example of how persistence is installed. Pretty straightforward. Install persistence. Anybody using Cobalt Strike in here besides us? A couple handful? Yeah. It's a good tool. Any other emulation pieces of software out there that you use? It's effective? You want to share? No? Okay. So we can always remove that and add it as required. Hopefully we wouldn't have to rely on that because we don't want to. And the issue, this is where logging comes in. If you're not logging effectively and you leave your payload, that's not going to look good. So keep that in mind. The escalation piece, pretty straightforward again. If you have to escalate, do. You shouldn't have to if you're pen testing. And maybe you don't have to if you're red teaming. Just define how you're going to do it and ensure that you're doing it and that you're executing with integrity. That's a new three-worder that we're using, execute with integrity. But it just keeps them, we're running out of time. So the post-exploitation piece, everything can kind of start over. You can gain access to those SBSs, those sensitive business systems. Continue to do your privesc and your recon as needed, depending on what your goals are. Again, resisting the urge to stop if you've gained access to your, if you've obtained your objective. Quick attack path demo. Initial phishing comes in. Sometimes we'll do a quick local hash dump, crack the passwords offline. At that point, we pivot to other users through lateral movement. What's a good tool for that? Bloodhound is awesome. That helps you graphical representation of Active Directory. If you're not using that, do, whether you're on the offensive side or defensive side. So using a tool like Bloodhound, we'll look for users with elevated permissions, such as an admin. We'll escalate those privileges and then move over to some of the critical assets. At that point, sky's the limit, pretty much game over. And we'll test their data loss prevention capabilities by exfiltrating some sort of mock PII. There's a tool called Egress Assess. It'll create mock PII with a credit card and social security numbers. You can spit that out over a variety of protocol channels, FTP, HTTP, HTTPS, SMTP, and a few others. I just realized when we did this, I'm pretty sure that's a floppy disk. And not even like, I think that's the old floppy disk. Remember that one? Yeah, that's funny. Right now, younger members of the audience says, what is floppy disk? All right, so one other piece that should be clearly defined, repeatable, and consistent are your SOPs, are your methodologies. The planning phase, right? Everything we do has a specific set of standards, a specific set of steps. So if you're looking for that, create it, define it, write it out. We'll be happy to share. And that goes from your ROE. You have to follow that ROE. You go out of scope, that's not good. It could confirm everything. Some of it's obvious. The execution phase, also obvious. Commence assessment, end assessment, and everything in between. but are you doing what you should be in between? And that includes remaining in scope, tracking all your payloads, tracking your persistence, and then the post-execution. Validation, analysis, confirming that the findings that you have obtained are actually true. Sometimes we'll feel like we gained access to a critical asset when turns out that's a development box. Kind of have to start over. So important to note that. Okay, ATA. We're going to run into a bunch of defensive tools out there that are going to really make life difficult for us. One of them is ATA, could be ATP. CrowdStrike has a tool called Carbon Black. Pick your tool. Bypassing this in some capacity or evading it is an important piece to your engagement. Some of these tools, it's like anything else. You can spend all the money on a tool, and if it's not tuned properly, you don't have the right staff behind it, it's not going to make a difference. So the point here is if we do run into that and have the time like the red team, we'll pull that tool down, install it in the lab, and figure out what the baseline is and understand how they can kind of potentially circumvent it. Here's just an example of a PTH. It used to be you can do pass the hash all day long. Can't do that as much anymore. Easily detectable. Find a way to circumvent that. Sometimes it requires a lot of sophistication, other times not so much. Here's just an example of maybe one host that's doing some activity on something you hadn't before. So you got to be careful. There's ways to circumvent that are beyond the scope of this presentation, but we can talk about that after. So other modification-sensitive groups, this is probably going to get you busted, but there are ways, again, to circumvent this. There's KSAs. One thing to point out is for your adversary emulation, ensuring that you have those set standards for a path for each of your operators, from your apprentice to your journeyman all the way up to your master, so that everybody knows what they need to do to get to the next level. If you want to be successful, everybody on the team has to advance their skills. That's something on which we rely very heavily. Just another example. Technical, administrative, not administrative, technical, for every different category. And that concludes this presentation. Questions? Yes?
Three related. Have you ever had customers do attribution back to you? If so, was it just a stupid OPSEC mistake or something else? And you engaged differently after?
No. Well, so first answer, yes. Our IP has been out there for years. People know it. They'll submit it to VirusTotal and see that it's us and do a quick who is and see it's DHS. Pen testing teams know because they know it's us. So we're on the same side.
Just in the red team.
So the red team, no. They come from the cloud now. So, no.
So never attribution back?
No. Not anymore. Maybe before.
Not at all.
Never. Right.
So you just execute the full 90 days and then report out?
Indeed. Yep.
Any opportunities for public teaming?
For what? For purple teaming? I mean, eventually at some point, I think we'll try to get there as we grow. We are growing. Looking for talent. So, yeah. Sky's the limit. Sir?
Your engagements involve critical infrastructure, like
We're trying to get into that space. The ICS organizations are more apt to use our validated architecture design review. They get very skittish about us touching their systems, and understandably so. But we're working very actively to get into that space. Yeah, but we have. Don't get me wrong. We just did a power plant last year. They gave us, I think, 8 hours to get into that power plant. Or it might have been a water treatment, I forget. And we were able to do so. So, yeah. Sir?
what's your biggest barrier to entry into these government entities when you go to do engagement? Those are the basics. What are some big lessons they learned in this process?
Technically, the barriers are minimal. The biggest challenge we have is our customers giving us what we need to be successful. They might scope us out because we can only interact with what's in the scope, and they might just give us 1/24. And that's just not enough. And they're resistant to letting us get the whole scope because they're afraid they're going to lose their jobs. They're afraid we're going to air out their dirty laundry, which we don't do. It's an important point to make. All the data we collect stays between us and the customers. So that's the biggest barrier. Technically, occasionally we'll hit a snag that prevents us from doing what we need to do. Maybe it's port security. Maybe they firewall us off, or you know what they'll do? They'll VLAN us off. They'll give us, hey, here's a great VLAN, but there's nothing in it. We can't get to anything else. So we have to work with the POC. If you want value out of this, you got to let us in. So that's what we run into. Yeah. Yeah, man. No. Our reports are very comprehensive. It defines the attack path, all the findings, all the recommendations. At that point, it's up to them. We do a follow-up in 6 months to ask them which one of the recommendations they've implemented. That way, we can track that and say, across the sectors, X number of sectors, that these number of vulnerabilities and issues have been mitigated over time. But we don't have a policy that says you have to do that. We do. When I say we, the government does have a policy for externally facing vulnerabilities through a binding operational directive. Those criticals have to be mitigated within 15 days, the highs within 30. And then we're driving that. If we feel there's a need for another binding operational directive from DHS that tells the government that you have to do this, or this, well, maybe that's an option in the future. We'd love to do that. And I think something towards which we're driving is in the government, what are some of the common teams you see? You always got to have an engineering team. You got a SOC. But how many government organizations have a dedicated penetration testing team? Not many. So maybe there's a bod someday that says, hey, you got to have a pen test team. Hopefully that's the future. I think it's necessary. Sir.
Are you red teaming FedRAMP providers?
Not so much, no. Oh, are we red teaming FedRAMP providers? No. We won't turn anything down. If it's going to help, it's going to help the government, it's going to help the mission, 100%. We'll do what we can. As we grow, I think those opportunities will present themselves. Absolutely. Yeah. The red team engagements are limited. We have resource issues like everybody else. We can only go so far. The queue is big. Our customer list, our waiting list is significant. Not for Sci-Hi, but for our pen test and our red team. I mean, it's up there. So the more resources we get, the more we can do. If there's nothing else, that will conclude the presentation. Thank you very much for hanging out.